Now you've got unlimited content, you have unlimited audience. My events regularly break 1,000 registrants. We've got a 2,000 registrant goal coming up. And so there becomes a flywheel where when you realize you're a media company first when it comes to this, and a demand gen and advertising company second, and definitely a content creation company third, you start to change the game and you start to attract partners who want to partner with you.
Welcome to the B2B Playbook. We built this channel for small B2B marketing teams who want to drive more revenue for their business. Every week, we're showing you how to create more demand for your brand step by step using our 5Bs framework. So if you're time poor, resource strapped, but you still want to make a big impact on your business, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button down below so you don't miss an episode. Welcome back to the B2B Playbook. Listeners, as you know, we rarely have guests on our show. Instead, we select a few true experts who align with our view that B2B marketing is more about people, not platforms. Today, our special guest is Justin Zimmerman. Justin is a partnerships expert who specializes in turning webinars into revenue. He does this as the founder of his company, Partner Playbooks. Justin got on my radar after I saw he kept breaking webinar records again and again and again with a super new and interesting approach that he's going to share with us today. So make sure you stick around for a ton of practical tips. Justin, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, yeah, thank you, George, so much for having me here. And it's always a pleasure to be able to just share and unlock. Every day is a new iteration and a new way of doing something a little bit better. That makes today the best day to share the best things I've got.
Absolutely. And Justin, I hear from B2B marketers all the time who are probably a little bit frustrated with the outcomes of their webinars currently that they're running and creating. There's quite a few pain points that I hear time and time again. They find it hard to get registrants. And once they do get people to register, getting people to attend is another issue. There's a bit of a lack of engagement once people are on, which makes it a bit hard to run. They're also really tired from constantly creating webinar after webinar. And then even at the end of it, it's tough to drive demos post webinar, which is really what leadership want to see. So, in your experience, Justin, where is it that most marketers are going wrong when it comes to webinars?
That's true, everything you said. And I've been there, I've done it. I got tired, burnt out. Who raise your hand if you've been up at 12 o'clock at night, midnight, the night before a big webinar, busting your you know what, to finish the slide deck or finish some sort of important piece. And by the end of it, you just feel completely exhausted. And I've been there, I've done that. Then you do all that work and then 50 people show up and you're just like, oh my God. And you do that over and over again. And so I've been there, I've done that. And I started to take a step back and I say, what's wrong with this process? What could I be doing differently? And so I started to identify what I call the top risks to webinars, the webinar risk list. And there really are just two big risks to that process. One is getting people to actually show up and hear your call to action, and making sure that you have that call to action very well defined and clearly articulated and on point. And that's just a really difficult skill and a big risk to the webinar. And so I've actually squished those two together as one is attendance and two is call to action. And so if you can't get people to show up, they can't hear your call to action. If you don't know who's on the webinar and you have your call to action dialed in, you're not going to get the follow-up. And so I took a step back and I said, okay, what do we really need to do here? How do we de-risk this process? And regardless of whether people show up, and this is where the big aha comes in. Regardless if people attend, regardless if people hear the call to action, regardless of whether the person at the end is a skilled salesperson who understands the delivery and articulation of a value proposition so good and great that there's no other reason for them to do anything other than click demo right now, right? Very difficult to have and do, especially if you've been up at night till midnight and you got to do a performance. You can still drive the economic outcomes that your boss and your boss's bosses are looking for. And so I sat back and I said, okay, the problem is chronology. Number one, we're following the order of operations of a webinar, like the way we wake up in the morning and we brush our teeth and just try to follow the regular step one, step two, step three, right? And so if we follow that, you're going to, like everybody else, you're going to get the results everybody else gets. And so I started to focus on really not optimizing for attendance and not optimizing for call to actions, which also removed not optimizing for the best content experience. And I know that's going to hurt people's ears. And I was there once too. If this finger is in the right place, I built over 5 years a content team solely dedicated to customer value. And so I've been there and done that. That's what this little picture is. Instead of optimizing for attendance and customer experience or value, I know it hurts your ears to say it, you optimize for data collection and attribution, because then all of a sudden a webinar becomes a massive opportunity to put your attention on the right things that matter. Because on a great day, you're going to get 50% of the people to show up. On an average day, you're going to get 25. So think about all the waste that goes into putting all your bets on attendance and calls to action for the 25% of the people that show up. I go, that's just not right. That's a waste. And so as soon as I started to shift the process to discovering intent and then discovering the questions that discover intent at the point in which 100% of the people who are possible in listening, learning, and buying from me are there at the point of registration, now I knew everything I needed to know to have a targeted conversation on the event, but most likely post event with those people with that data. In fact, actually, the secret is you do it pre event, and that's a whole other system that I can get into that I've built some tooling around. And the big problem with webinars is, right? Don't optimize for attendance and content, optimize for driving the most number of registrations and then optimizing for the data collection on those registrations so you can have targeted, personalized follow up both pre and post event.
Wow. Okay. Look, I think that's probably going to be music to leadership's ears, I would say. And a lot of marketers would be probably a little confused by this, Justin. So I'm very excited for you to share your 5 step framework on the pre webinar information collection phase a little bit later in the show. And in terms of if webinars are done the right way, what does that look like for marketers? What is the output? What is the outcome? I think you've probably touched on that a little bit, Justin. Could you just reiterate that a little bit more for our audience? Once we lead them to that promised land of you've implemented Justin's webinar framework, what does their life look like then?
Yeah. And so all of a sudden, and of course, there's different playbooks for different moments and motions, but the overall concept is you're running a media play at first and foremost. You're running a media play the same way that you go on YouTube, the same way you go on Instagram, the same way you go anywhere. There's content that's attracting you to come to that event. It's top of funnel content. And guess what those platforms do? They sell advertising to people who they can target, hence the data collection they're getting from you to sell to advertisers to put something that you're going to click on and then drive some sort of sale. And so as soon as you start to realize webinars are media devices first and foremost, from a audience aggregation, and then you become your own advertiser on your own media platform, you really start to change how you do your webinars, because all of a sudden it's about attention in the marketplace, capturing attention and attaching data attribution to that attention. And now you're thinking differently about the content you're creating, because if you're up all night creating webinar decks, you're going to burn out. There's just way too much attention space you need to fill inventory wise for you to have consistently high quality content you're producing internally all the time on your own. When the reality is, your partners, the influencers all around you, they're begging for attention and audience. They have great content. And so if you know how to architect and orchestrate, that's your job. Architect and orchestrate the best content, and then layering in this, we'll call it data capture system. Now you've got unlimited content. You have unlimited audience. My events regularly break 1,000 registrants. We've got a 2,000 registrant goal coming up. And so there becomes a flywheel where when you realize you're a media company first when it comes to this, and a demand gen and advertising company second, and definitely a content creation company third, you start to change the game and you start to attract partners who want to partner with you, and you build this flywheel. Just was on a call a couple of minutes ago. Hey, Justin, we want to be part of your event. We're going to help you get to the next 500 or so more registrants for your event. And then you can make deals with other people of influence because they see you have influence. And then you just stack that influence, and then you run ads to you and your partner stuff throughout this process by collecting this data.
Okay, so you're not saying then that it doesn't really matter what content you're putting out there. You're saying, like, don't kill yourself. There's plenty of partners, potential partners out there who already have great content. Work
Yeah.
with them to bring that to a mutual audience.
Yeah, the best example is there are people who spend years writing a book and the book is amazing, But getting the book written as a content expert, subject matter expert, is really just getting you in the door of even making any impact at all. You write a book, you still have to bring it to market. And that's where most people fail. Most people are experts in what they do. They know what they do and they're fantastic at it. But what they're not fantastic at is creating an audience in which their content can have life and liberty. And if you can find those people who have subject matter expertise, which you know who they are, they'll sit down and do it. You bring them the audience and they'll do the heavy lifting of creating the content.
Actually, years ago when we started out the B2B Playbook, it's called the B2B Playbook because it was meant to be a book originally. We were meant to write the book, which shared our demand generation framework. And what we found, it was just taking us too long. And then we would spend so long pulling this thing together. And then we had to worry about the distribution after. And instead, we decided let's just release it like as a media company as we go, as we're creating it, release it as a podcast, a YouTube channel, share it on LinkedIn, and it just ended up becoming so much richer because we were engaging with other like-minded businesses. We were engaging with our dream customers as well, which really added so much color to what we're doing. So I really align with what you're saying there. For this webinar process, I want to break it down to the pre, during, and post webinar phase so our audience can really get a handle on what to do at each stage. Pre-webinar, let's start there. So, how can marketers drive more registrants to their webinars? I think you spoke a little bit about partners. Maybe you can talk more about how we can leverage partners to do that.
This could be a good time to share my screen. If there's one thing to share that is of visible value,
Absolutely.
it would be this. By the way, this used to be a vision of the future of what I was doing, and just very recently, it's more of a artifact and success of a roadmap completion. And so I actually have a built tooling to make this all real now. And you really have 3 or 4 parts here. This first part is traffic generation. This next part is that registration sequence. There's a thing that we can talk about a little bit here, the in-event calls to action, but don't necessarily need to get into that too much. And then there's the qualification tracks for, you could call it post event, but you could also, and I run this pre event for people who raise their hand during the registration process and identify as potential in market leads. That actually leads me to another graphic that I could bring on here. And then these automated personalized campaigns run on behalf of your SDR teams, double downing and qualifying them and creating demos and bookings. And so I've got this all works. I've got clients running this right now. And so the heart of it here is really identifying traffic sources and people that you're going to do these events with. And then this middle system that helps score, identify, and a better word for it is not score because that implies numerics. I could be wrong. And I'm sure there's some marketing ops people who are going to listen to this and also say, boo, no, Justin, you can't say that. But I'll say there's especially at least at an event level, you don't need like sophisticated scoring systems. You just need the right questions, and then people tell you who they are and where they are. And then you get more of a lead profile than you do a lead score. And so I say lead scoring, but it's actually more lead profiling. And based on the profile and the pain points and the role and the title and the industry and some other important factors, you can get conversations started with your registrants. In fact, that's a sub note, is that my belief is that with the deal size above $5,000 or $10,000, you're getting out of PLG and like self-service, and you're getting into like sales-led conversions. And so if you're in that space, which is a lot of companies, marketing's main goal is to generate conversations for sales teams. So like whatever you can do to discover where people at and get them to read and respond and generate a conversation for the salesperson. And so that's also implicit in this, is during your webinar registration process, what can you discover and find out about them so that way you can generate a conversation for sales. But back to your question, how do you find partners that will help you generate a substantial amount of traffic repeatedly and consistently to make it even worthwhile to host these events? Because if you're not getting 500 people, 250 maybe, but if you're not getting 500 people registered for your events, the average good marketer, right, is a good $90,000 a year, 120,000. And so your economic value is going to be tied to the amount of hours necessary to break even on your full-time, your FTE. And so if you're not getting 500, or at least building towards something and have a plan to get there, Your value or the value of the webinars you're doing is going to come into question. You don't start with 1,000, but I think I started, my first event had 70, and the next one had 130 and 170 and 220. So you should see growth week, month over month. If you're not seeing that growth, you really need to take a look at where your traffic sources and calls to action are, because you can't do it alone, and nor should you, because there are just so many great sources of partner traffic. I haven't tested, but I know it's expensive. Cold, paid, webinar driven traffic. There are some people who have figured it out, but I haven't really seen a fantastic example. Email me, call me, whatever it is, DM me if you do have one. But the best form of traffic to your events is going to come from your partners, and even better, LinkedIn. It's like the signals are everywhere. If you're not following all the people and influencers in your space, seeing hundreds of likes and comments, like those are the people who have influence. Those are the people who have content. And those are often also the people who don't have an infrastructure behind them to leverage that audience. And so I've worked with a number of influencers. Like one example, he gets 90,000 to 170,000 on average impressions and like 400 to 700 likes and engagements. And so he understands LinkedIn content and he understands LinkedIn audience, but he doesn't understand traffic generation, demand generation. And so there are just so many people out there who understand like the first part of the puzzle, and someone needs to come in and help them generate like the structure to take that traffic and attention off of LinkedIn and move it into something that's like you see in front of you. And so one of our first tests, I go, just follow me on this, please. Just do this one thing. And within 24 hours, we had 1,500 new subscribers to an ebook download. And so I'm just like, that's all. Case in point. And so go find those, we'll call it like mid-range to like upper high level like influencers, but not like the fancy ones that you can tell they're going to charge you $5,000 or $10,000 to work with them. There are plenty of them out there who aren't monetized. And if you can come up with a great value proposition, which I've discovered a couple of them that work, get 4 or 5 of them together, because they have courses, they have consulting, they have side projects, they want to build their newsletter list. And so there are other forms of non-monetary compensation that you can make deals with them if you know how to structure them and execute on them, that nothing performs better. I have not seen anything perform better than a post from a very well-known LinkedIn influencer around an event that they're going to either speak at, sponsor, and or participate in, and to drive those conversions. And I track everything. And so I know within my sphere, when someone has a post, I can expect 200 or 300 from these people, 150 from them, 75 from these people, and that person. And so it's just like you start to do the math and you know how to build your tribe of influencers around events. And then if you have a system like is my screen still showing? Yeah. If you have a system in place to help sift, sort, and segment those people who are best for this product and that product and this, which is what I've built. Doesn't have to be this sophisticated, but you can start with something. You can make great deals with really amazing influencers for no money and drive tons of pipeline for you and your company.
So is it really just influencers that we should be looking to partner with, or potentially complementary businesses as well? Where do you tend to focus, Justin? Because you mentioned influencers quite a lot
Great
there.
businesses right now have influencers. So it's one and the same. And yeah, maybe there's some variation, but some of the best influencers are like CMO at this company or SDR salesperson at that company. And so you can partner with them, but it's also, and that's the thing, is like influencers who are employees. And there's maybe there's two main categories, like influencers who are self-employed, independent entrepreneurs, and influencers who are employed at XYZ company. Oftentimes, those influencers who are at XYZ company have expertise around that particular product's ICP. And so, via them working there, that makes that company oftentimes a good partner as well from a technology standpoint. So, you get both when you find those types of influencers.
Yeah, and I suppose you often get access to that company's distribution list too, because it's great
Yeah.
content collaboration. So not just that individual influencers list, but often their company's list as well.
Yeah, and it's sad because I've done deals with, I don't like big companies, really big companies. I got super duper excited by, oh my God, they got 10,000 customers. They're going to, and I thought they're going to drive hundreds and hundreds of people to the event. And it was the tiny founder led, like almost startup size company that outperforms them all the time. And so oftentimes the bigger the company, you can probably almost bet you're going to get less performance from them.
Okay, that is fascinating. That's really good insights for our listeners. So go and find who those influencers
Bigger
are.
often isn't better, at least from a marketing and events perspective. Now, Salesforce wise and getting embedded into like their co-sell motions and figuring out like real nitty-gritty type of integration and product led. Yeah, I'm not saying not that. Like that level of like big is a different type of success than marketing motion size. I would say just for the marketing side, it's often smaller is better.
And in your experience, is it better to try for a single webinar to partner with one influencer, two, three? How do you tend to try and structure it there?
It's easy for me to say a lot because I just have gotten to the point where like I know how to juggle 10 at a time. And I would say for someone who's just like the more the better. My latest playbook is basically this triangle where you have four different layers of influencers that you layer in with different reasons and blah 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 blah. Like super sophisticated from if I were to start with it right now. And so pick two. The answer is pick two, see how it works, and have some simple copy calls to action in 2 weeks, right? Don't make it hard on yourself. Set up a quick and dirty landing page. Use Zoom, right? Don't get anything fancy. I still use Zoom, right? Like I have companies, the big webinar companies, like, hey, use our platform. And I go in there, I'm like, no, this is complicated, even for me. It's just like too much, too fancy. Doesn't need to be fancy. Simple is great. Set up a quick and dirty landing page, come up with a headline, and in 2 weeks, like I said, it took me like 4 months to get this one influencer just to say yes to this one thing. And then once we executed, it was like 3 hours of work. And then in 24 hours, we had 1,500 results. And so it's just the hard work is the orchestration and the convincing. Don't spend it on at least in the beginning, on the technical and the MarTech and the landing page. Don't get fancy. Just simple calls to action, get people to show up. Who cares if they have slide decks? Make it podcast style. Just test, will people click? That was, oh, I forgot. That was our first test. Dude, put this link here, post this there. We didn't even have a landing page. That was it. I gave him a trackable link. I go, just put this in your profile and then reference the profile in your post. And we were like, oh, look at all that traction. And so yeah, just find that minimum test that people will say yes to and go from there.
Fantastic advice. Great places to get started. All right, Justin, some of the magic for this process starts actually with registration. So before the webinar even begins. And you use the registration process, from what I can see, to really identify who those hand raisers are, and then I suppose who is possibly in market, and then who
Yep.
is just there to learn. Can you take us through in more detail what that 5-step registration form process does and really what
Yeah,
it's
this is like my version one template that I built. This is my own tool, tested it out, it's performed beautifully. And so I will walk through that registration process real quick. So this is live and real. This is a clone of an event I did. We had about 1,300 people register, and you can check this out. And they're just quick side notes. Again, you could see how much copy is on this page as far as what you'll learn. I didn't put like a ton into here's what you'll learn, 3 bullet points. What I leveraged is these people's networks and trust that people are going to come to this event and they're going to learn a lot from these people. And so you don't have to say a lot when people know that the people that you're bringing on know a lot. And so I just focused on leveraging that. Here's 3 kind of important things what you'll learn. And then I really put emphasis on incentives for people to sign up, incentives and prizes for people to attend, and incentives for other people to promote. And that's a whole other conversation. And so this is a demo page I've set up because I have the skip button on. Normally, I wouldn't allow people to skip the registration. And so, yeah, if you notice, this is a 6-step registration flow. So this is the tool that I've built to solve this registration issue of scoring, profiling people at that 100% as they register. In fact, you can see the steps along it: sign up, personalize, invite a coworker, some bonuses, and some other things. And so here's just your classic registration here. We don't need to go over this too much. I've set this up in a way so any company doing events and webinars, whatever they're currently getting on their registration process, I can help improve the first step of the process, which is just get them in and signed up. And so we just ask the basic stuff. I take away all the extra things that you need that people are asking for lead scoring because you don't need that here. I can get into a little bit more complicated, a little bit more complex advanced stuff. I have this pre-event session that people can invite and register to. We'll save that for another time. It's a great way, though, to create some indoctrination. And then the next step in the process is that profiling step. And so this doesn't look that complicated. It's not that complicated. What's complicated, though, is that what I do is I sit down and I talk with each one of these companies and I figure out what does an exact perfect lead look like. And then the hard work is orchestrating that. And then the second part of the hard work is then coming up with language that then makes it a standard registration process that covers all the people's profiling needs. And so this is where the magic happens on my end, where we figure out team size. We talk about all the major pain points and problems that people can select. If there's a role or title that matters more to one partner or another, and then oftentimes there's an integration component to scoring a perfect lead. And so you can see by knowing people's pain points, team size, roles, and any sort of CRMs, you can then capture that data. And then what you're not going to be able to see, and probably for another time, is I actually have these customized outreach emails that then take this data and then create introductions to the different partners. Hey, George, I saw you registered for the event. Did you know Rob is an expert in helping companies co-sale? I saw that was a pain point and problem for you. As someone who's a partner manager using HubSpot, I think he'd be a great person to talk to. And so I have these like templatized, personalized emails, and then Rob or so and so is CC'd on that email. And then he responds back and says, hey, yeah, I can help you. Do you want to talk? And so you could see pain point and profiling identification meets, like I said before, a job of a marketer to create conversations for sales. And so the conversation is started right at this point. I have an invite step. I have an ebook download step, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, that's like the big part right there. Like that second step in the process is if you're relying solely on people to show up and attend your event, you're capturing at the most 25, 50% of the audience if they're paying attention and you're delivering it right. And you have that one moment where if you can say the right words in the right way, you can get them to click and sign up and get a trial. Or you could find out what their pain points are at the moment of registration. And then on their own terms, because this is actually a benefit to them based on where they are. Maybe they're traveling, maybe their boss is out, maybe they're sick, maybe there's all these reasons why they can't pay attention at that one moment, that one time you're asking them to. You now know enough to be clear, diligent, and follow up on their own timeframes. And yeah, repurposing content can come into this, but what really matters is you want to their pain point existed before they registered and their pain point existed afterwards. And regardless of whether they attended the webinar, that pain point still exists. And until someone from your company can talk to them in a way that bonds them with you and their ability and your ability to solve that pain point, right? That's where the sales opportunity is. And that's the power of profiling people at the point of registration. If they show up for the webinar and you can solve it and get that moved and accelerated down the pipeline faster and further, great. But that was just the first touch point. And that may be the final thing I can talk about is think about your webinars as data collection tools and that first touch point in helping them possibly move down funnel. But if they don't show up or they don't resonate with them then and there, at least you have the data to say something important, valuable, and relevant to them all the way to and through until they solve that pain point.
So, as the organizer, you get the data of everyone. And then is it based on their answers that you decide which person, again, based on the answers, what they filled out, which of their details should be sent to which partner that you hosted the webinar with? Is that right?
Yeah, so each partner helps market the event, and each partner has a certain dimension in which they can help the people registering. And so from there, depending on, and there's a newer version of this that I'll just, again, you should get the gist of it, but for the most part, yeah, it's basically matching solutions providers and experts with people who have those problems and getting that conversation started.
And so, from what I'm hearing, is it doesn't even really matter that much whether or not people show up to the webinar, or at the point where you capture their details, as you said, you've established that someone has some kind of need for what you're doing. And so then the turning up or even watching it doesn't become quite as important. Is that fair to say?
And that's the whole de-risking that I talked about before is we put all this energy and effort into these events for the singular moment where you present and then you pitch something, right? There's got to be an economic reason why your boss is paying for you to do these things for your company. And so that was like my big aha. Oh man, just stop doing that. Stop staying up till midnight trying to finish the slide deck and hope that everybody shows up and it's pixel perfect. It just makes the value of a webinar. And that's the thing is the value of a webinar is no longer that singular moment in time. It actually provides a much longer tail of value because of the data. and the ability to continue to follow up with people and provide them value based on their actual pain points and problems when they're paying attention, when they have the attention to pay.
I love it. I think probably a question some of our marketers might have who are watching and tuning into YouTube and seeing the screen share of the form is, Justin, it's a multi-step form. We're effectively asking people to go through 6 steps before completing that registration. Are you noticing any kind of drop off there in terms of people who aren't
Let
bothered
me
to
show you the
finish the
numbers,
form?
and these are pretty much consistent through all the versions of this event I've run. So yeah, that's what most people ask, and here they are. Oh, yeah, something like this. Sharon, I was as you were talking, I started sliding to that screen here. Yes, I document everything. And so if you want to run the percentages or numbers, these are the official numbers from my last event. And so you can see here, step one, 1180, step two, 800, step three, and you can read the titles. And so there's varying drop off, but I put a skip button at the bottom. So if people want to skip, they can, and they stop where they want. So it's a self-guided, self-selected tour. And so you can see right here, that's the most number of people. And then actually this number was the next highest, which is pretty close to this one. And people are going through it and they're filling it out and converting.
Fantastic. And that registration actually happens on that first step, right? So
Yeah, so
complete the
that's
first
that
step.
registration, that first page that we saw was this right here.
Yeah, okay, great. So you could have someone complete the first step, skip the rest, which most don't,
Yeah, they
still
can skip the
registered for
rest.
the
They're converted, and so and that's why I actually built the tool I built. Is not all tools do it the way that I do it, like a Typeform or other. Typeform doesn't even do it this way, and so I built this in a way where each step sends the conversion, and then you don't have to worry about people dropping off that you don't have to worry about drop off on the things that matter.
Fantastic. Talk to me about now during the webinar. So we've collected all the information before the webinar now has come up. What tips do you have around during the webinar? I suppose making sure that the webinar still delivers good value for our audience too. And is there anything else that we need to do during that webinar to make this process as successful as possible?
Yeah, again, I've gone from being like content producer, sweating it out, working too hard, losing sleep, to being content curator. And so I know that when I pick somebody who's got well established credibility, subject matter expertise, and a slide deck, they can send me the slide deck ahead of time. I can see that they know what they're talking about. I no longer worry about the content because I'm at the point of choosing a speaker. It's implicit downstream that the content's going to be good. So I don't even worry about the content anymore.
Fantastic. No, I think it's a really, really smart approach. And that's what we found too when we have guests on like yourself today. We knew that you were going to bring a fantastic framework, that you were going to have tons of actionable advice. And so for us, it was just a matter of doing a bit of research, making sure that Justin knows what he talks about. Like we firmly believe that. And you are effectively doing all the heavy lifting today. And we really thank you for that.
Yeah, I
But
give a case in point. I was going to say it earlier, but yeah, it's just like case in point. Are you going to sit down and come up with a whole spiel on partner and research it? And but no, yeah, just find the people who do it and whatever economic outcome that you have tied to this. But at least you've got the audience paying attention somewhere, somehow, and at least you give you the opportunity to leverage that audience into something that's economically beneficial to everybody.
yeah, that's right. It's about creating those win-win scenarios. What about in the webinar itself? Should we be promoting our product or service at all any point? Do we do that in a soft way, a hard
Yeah,
way? How
so
do
I've
we
got a
do that?
couple of different playbooks that create different type of formatted webinars. And so you hear webinar and it's like a one size fits all and everybody kind of jumps to like their own incarnation of it. And so I've got my webinar playbook formats very closely tied to these different structures. And so if you're doing you and a partner just did an integration, and we'll call it like level one webinar here, level webinar partner integration. Like what you can do is you can have like a big talk track around like the value of the partnership and the future of what's happened. And there's some narrative structures that really make it. If you can find someone already in the marketplace who like speaks to the motion, so it's usually like methodology should lead to technology, right? And so the reason why someone came up with the technology is because someone was doing something before less efficiently, right? And technology makes things more efficiently. And there are people in the marketplace who you developed this technology to help make whatever they were doing more efficient. And so if you can find those people who are either verbally articulate enough to talk about the paradigm shift from before and after, right? Before I was doing this, after it's this, and like the benefits of life and liberty and prosperity and all these great things. That's a great way. You have a main keynote around the ideology and the philosophy, and maybe a little bit of the methodology. And then what you then do is then that sets it up for, okay, great. I'm seeing a whole new world now. How do I get this? So that's when then your technology comes into play. And so within 40 to 60-minute webinar, you can run your first part of the playbook of the event with kind of the thought leadership side of this new partnership. And then it gives you permission to get into the more bottom of the funnel demo. It's now let why, how, and the reasons that this partnership came about. Let's show you how to get the value out of it, which is why us two companies came together. And so stick around because we're going to give you a demo on how to take what you just heard into actual operational practice. And so then you create the space in which you can then do a product demo, which makes your sales team happy, your boss happy, and then you can have the right calls to action. And so for those people who are on this webinar right now, who blah, 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 raise your hand, click yes, hit the poll, chat it in. Here's a QR code. You can hold up a little QR code, take out your phone, whatever. Like that's a way to bring the content that's not necessarily yours into it, and then give yourself an opportunity to, in your kind of like most basic, and I hope that's not offensive, but like in your most basic outcomes, right? How most people think about webinars in B2B SaaS is you want a product demo and you want trials and sales. So how do you reverse engineer the experience to give you the opportunity to do that while also adding value in the process through thought leadership? And so it takes those two kind of top of funnel, bottom of funnel experiences and merges them together.
So you're ultimately leading them to the logical conclusion that, hey, based on the problems that you have, and you have them because you've turned up to this is what the promised land looks like. And how dare you not then share if you have a solution to help fix that pain? And as you
Yeah,
said, you've
yeah,
got
yeah.
permission
And
to do that. Of course, you should share it.
absolutely. Yeah, and if you're a marketer on a team or a partner person on a team, then you can use that approach. And then it works even better. There's a buddy of mine that just launched his app today. Greg launched a new PRM, and he's the founder. And so it's even better if just a founder story and you're a founder-led growth and you're helping build this thing. You can be the person at the beginning of the webinar who talks about the pain point, because often founders, they struggled and they said, you know what, I'm going to go build something to make this thing better. And so like the founder story of like your life before and after and why you set down on this course and this journey to build this thing or this feature, like it's a perfect opportunity for the founder to do the event and host that piece.
Talk to me about the post webinar actions that our marketers should take. You touched on it a little earlier with follow ups, but yeah, I'd love to hear more about your process post webinar.
Yes, I just tested and validated, proved a really good post webinar like demo booking sequence for some of my customers. Not the copy is very specific, and I would say like you look at it, it doesn't look technical, but to go create it requires a deep level of thought to get to the results. But conceptually really easy to understand is there going to be people who attend your session and there's people who don't attend your session. Oh yeah, I think it's a waste of attention to send everybody the recording. Like, here's the recording, thank you. And if you don't put, and you have a general recordings ready, that's just like, that's one form. You could call it lazy marketing. And I understand also you're tired, you're burnt out, you don't want to be done with this webinar. And I've been there and I just want to get this over and done with. And it's the last like I said before, everybody follows a chronological order of operations. And so when you do a webinar, the last thing's a recording, you send it out. Like the book that just got written, you've only in some ways just started and you're usually too tired to do anything next. And so that's why I've created these post-event follow-up sequences that are templatized based on the answers that you collect during this process. Yesterday, I sat in on one of my clients' post-event, we call them makeup sessions. Hey, we're hosting a makeup session. And then what we ended up doing is basically taking, like I told you before, there's the founder story and then there's the demo. We did a post event makeup session encore with that, and then just sent it out to all the people, whether they attended or not, and saying, hey, if you missed it, you want to learn about it again. And we had to use the Calendly link. So it wasn't like anything, like I said, low tech, like a group Calendly link. And there was like, I think 15 or 20 people who showed up to basically watch a product demo. And so when was the last time you had 15 or 20 people eagerly show up and book a time for you on your product demo? And so there's just subtle nuances in language and positioning, sequencing, and personalization that if you know when and where and how to use them, you just get way better results. And yeah, in fact, actually, we filled up 3 weeks worth of those spots. And so we had one for this week, one for next week, and one for the following. So we gave people 3 options to book on these group demos. So he's got 3 weeks worth of on Tuesdays, these group demo sessions that he's doing from post event traffic. And so he was like, I think he got about 200. Oh, you can't see my screen anymore, but yeah, of the personalization step of the 823 people who profiled themselves, 200 or 197 of those people profiled themselves as people of interest with problem aware, but not solution aware. Right. And that's actually the bridging gap that my approach to marketing solves. The last conceptual thing is in the spectrum of people who are attending your events, you got people here to listen and learn. You've got people here who possibly try and buy. The listen and learners are not problem aware, or your solution is not something that they're interested in. And then you've got people, when they register, they profile themselves as problem aware and then good fits for you. And then that's that scoring process. And so my goal with these events is to take people who have problem awareness and then make them solution or feature aware. And then they're either really close to like purchase decision, and that's what we typically see when we see people book demos and trials. But then there's a whole spectrum a little bit earlier in the process, possibly really early in the process. And this is the underlying concept of demand capture. Demand capture is finding all the people who are not just ready for a trial or a demo at this moment in time, but earlier in the journey, and finding that intent around problem awareness and then making them solution aware. And then you capture that demand upon trial or conversion to sales.
Are these post webinar actions that you've been detailing, are they automated with the platform that you've set up?
Some of it, yes, some of it, no. It is automatable, but sometimes I have too many partners a part of the event. And so I don't want to over saturate the number of introductions and follow ups. And so, depending, I'll run an event that has 6 partners, right? So I'm not going to do just smartness. But if you're running like smaller, like one or two other partners on a webinar, yeah, I would automate that. I would just timing equals delay this, time equals delay that. And then send it 3 days later, send 5 days later, and send 10 days later. And you
Awesome.
have some varying messaging that makes sense for all that.
Awesome. This is a fantastic process. I think our listeners are absolutely going to love this. Justin, you've been so generous with your time. And look, you've convinced me, and I'm sure our listeners, that all of us can be squeezing a lot more out of our webinars that we're already doing. And so many people listening are already doing these webinars, probably experiencing those pain points that you shared right at the top of this episode. So thank you so much for sharing like your framework and tactics around it. You've been really generous with your knowledge as well. I'm sure that this is one that our listeners are going to go back to and listen to again and again. Before we round out the conversation, is there anything that you'd like to direct our audience's attention to, or anything else that you'd like to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I've got a growing list of early notification beta customers. I've got a tool behind the scenes that I'm using, building to make all of this easier and better. And so the site is ugly right now, but that's okay. A work in progress with that. But if you go to askmore.app, when you ask more, you get more. And so the name of the app is what most people don't do in marketing is they ask the least amount or they ask too much. And so I've built this app, as you can see, both in the registration process to ask more, and then in the follow-up campaigns to ask more. And so if you go to askmore.app and you're interested in learning more about this tool and service when it becomes more available, I'll be happy to chat and talk with you then.
Fantastic. We will link to that in the show notes and in the article that will complement this podcast and YouTube video. Thank you so much, Justin, for your time. Would you like people to also connect with you on LinkedIn? Is that the best place for
Sure.
people to
Yeah.
find you?
Yeah. That'd be great too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Justin Zimmerman, everyone, make sure you go and check him out, give him a follow, reach out to him if you need help with your webinars. Justin, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.